you don't have to qualify to have a drinking problem.
Right.
Then the rubber meets the road. You don't have to get so bad. You don't have to call yourself an alcoholic to get help. You don't have to call yourself an alcoholic to see that alcohol is not serving you. And it's not even it's not even about how much you drink. It's how much are you thinking about drinking? You know, if you go and you have 2 glasses of wine every night after, with or after dinner, most people will go, oh, it's just 2 glasses of wine. Well, if you don't have control over that and those 2 glasses of wine have more power over you than you have over them, you're allowed to say, I don't want to do this anymore. And I want to learn how to make that happen.
I'm Matt.
Hey, I'm Steve.
Hey, I'm John.
This is the Sober Friends Podcast. We're here for the sober curious, the new guy, and the old timer. We're here to talk about the stuff anyone looking to live alcohol-free has to face day to day, and how we overcame those struggles. We speak for no 12-step group, but we do try to remain anonymous. You're not alone. This is the Sober Friends Podcast. Oh, I'm so excited. I am so excited to have Tricia Lewis on. She is the host of the Recovery Happy Hour podcast. Tricia, I'd say you're sober influencer, sober advocate, all-around person to show, especially for women, how sobriety and getting off the booze can improve your life. Tricia, welcome to the Sober Friends Podcast.
Thank you. Thanks so much for having me, Matt. I'm psyched to be here.
Yeah, I'm psyched to have you. When I first started this, I used to listen to a lot of sober podcasts. You were one of them because if you just type in recovery, you're the first one that came up, at least at the time. So that tells me a pretty big one. And I talked about it early on. When you stopped doing the podcast because, knocked me over with a feather, why would you walk away from something when you're doing it so successfully? But you're smiling now. So things must have been good and it must have been the right decision to do that.
Yeah, that was a tough one. But, it's funny, you were just, before we got on the air, you were just talking about like the burnout that can happen sometimes. And, I had to make a decision when I ended mine. Nobody starts a podcast and thinks it's going to be successful.
Right.
At least I did not. And, it was very successful, probably because I started early, it was in 2018. I had to make a decision of pursuing being a full-time podcast host or concentrating on my full-time corporate career at the time. So I made a choice to focus on my career and stopped. And I love it because there's so many great podcasts out there now to listen to instead. It is not a recovery podcast desert anymore.
No, when I got sober 10 years ago, I found Recovered Cast, and that was it. Yeah. It was like Mark, and that was it. There was like something here and there, and I was looking for more than one, and I'm like, this doesn't speak to me. I just kept going back there. I love the fact that there are so many, regardless of what your flavor is,
right?
What you're looking for and what speaks to you, you can find that. If mine is not what speaks to you, there is something else out there for you. That's what you should listen to.
Yeah. Well, and that's recovery in general. If it doesn't speak to you, there's something else out there that will.
Right. So your podcast is still out there. I say you're still the host because it's out there. It's a great resource. And I'm giving some, what do I call this? Some behind the curtain stuff with podcasting. What's great about sober podcasting is it's evergreen. So I could put this in the can and this is going to be as relevant 5 years from now as it is today.
It does age well.
Yeah. So if there's something out there, go and listen to it. It works for you. So it's your show today. I'd like to hear a little about you. Mm-hmm. I know there's been about 1 million times you probably talked about your story. I'd love to just hear a little bit. What's a little bit of the story? And let's go and have a conversation about why sobriety has been great for you and how did you overcome the stuff that happens in life and stay sober?
You got it.
That's the trick.
Yeah, I'm happy to share my story. And, I was your garden variety, high functioning alcoholic. On the outside, it didn't look like I had a problem. I was very I was a very like ambitious, high achieving, goal oriented person growing up. Grew up in a family with addiction and alcoholism. So my only true understanding of alcohol was that it was bad. And if you drink, you're going to become an alcoholic. I had a very sort of polarized view of alcohol. And so someone close to me in my family, dipped into drug and alcohol addiction for what was my brother, and he's sober now, which is wonderful. But growing up close to someone who just goes all the way in for a long time, that changes the dynamic of your family. And so my role was, okay, this is the role I assigned myself, by the way, not one that anyone told me I had to play. But my role was, okay, be as perfect as possible, take up as little space as possible. Everyone else is busy dealing with crisis. Tricia, if you can just stay small and don't have any problems, then you will make it easier on everyone else. And so I learned how to kind of stuff things down real early. And, and I got to give Tricia back then credit for that, because most of us are not taught healthy coping skills.
Right.
You grow up embedded in American culture, at least, embedded in a culture where alcohol looks like the solution. That's what we're sold and told. And so, I would say that my drinking was not normal from the first time I drank. When I was 16, a boy broke up with me, and I wanted to change the way I felt. I didn't want to feel that pain anymore. And so I took 3 shots of whiskey on an empty stomach at age 16, which, I should have been, it was the 90s. I should have been like sipping on a Zima. Like that was indicative. That was indicative of what was to be a much larger problem. But that also explains my view on drinking. I liked to drink to change the way I felt and to give myself some kind of feeling of control, because I felt very out of control most of the time. My feelings made me feel out of control. I didn't know how to navigate those. So I moved into a restaurant and hospitality career in my 20s. And I was a chef. And, in kitchens, we drank hard as a badge of honor. I figured if I worked hard, then I can drink hard. I deserved that. That was my reward. And as long as I wasn't getting in fights or, getting DUIs, it was no big deal.
I'm just thinking that in the kitchen business, that seems like it's a high drug and alcohol abuse industry.
Yes.
Just the people I've known.
Yes, absolutely. And I've learned that so many other industries are too. We all just think that we're, I think that the restaurant industry accommodates addiction very, very well. I think that you can be a functioning, have a functioning substance use disorder and still be successful in the restaurant industry. It's just a different type of business.
Well, it's also there, weird hours, long hours, being there late.
Yeah, being around other unhealthy people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So, I just figured, well, what's the big deal? I'm not hurting anyone else. And drinking was my solution. And I just thought I was just a drinker. I drink expensive things. I drink expensive wines. I drink vodka out of glass bottles, not plastic bottles. So why would I be an alcoholic? I still had the idea of the unhoused person under a bridge drinking out of a brown paper bag. That trope just follows everyone around. So about mid-30s, I went through a surprise divorce. My whole life changed in a day. Found out my ex-husband was having multiple affairs, and I drank through that. I didn't know how to handle that. So I just went to the thing that had always served me in the past. And what happened was that put the gas pedal down on my drinking problem. And in 2016, I finally had enough. It was getting dangerous. I had been a daily drinker for a long time. I was now physically dependent on it. I was hiding the fact that I was so sick from hangovers every morning that I was having white wine in the morning to just feel a little bit better. It's funny. It's like how that happens all of a sudden and you just justify it. And yeah, 2016, it looked like any other weekend that looked great on Instagram. I was going to a birthday party, to go to a whiskey tasting on a party bus, and then going to, a brunch the next day, and day drinking all day. And then that goes into the night, and then you're making really bad decisions that you wouldn't have made if you were sober. And I woke up and I felt so sick one day, and I couldn't drink anymore. I was like, I just laid on the couch. And then that turned into 2 days, and then 3 days. And I realized I still felt like I had the flu. My kidneys hurt. And I was going through alcohol withdrawal, which is very dangerous. If you're a long-term daily drinker, do not stop. All of a sudden, that has the potential to kill you. So what I did was very stupid. But I realized in those 3 days, oh my gosh, this is withdrawal. I'm detoxing right now. Like, we're here, Tricia. This is happening. And I think by day 3, I realized, wow, okay, I've gone 3 days. Maybe I could go 4 days. Maybe I could just keep going. And I found a podcast. At this point, I figured I'll just do some research. I'm just getting some data. I wasn't committing. I wasn't like, oh, I'm going to stop now. It was like, well, let me just do a little research.
Do you remember what podcast it was?
Recovery Elevator.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's a pretty big one.
It is, yeah. So I listened to that podcast, and I listened to someone's story, and she sounded just like me. And for the first time, I went, oh my God, there are people who drink just like I do. There are people who hide it because they're protecting their image, that they're fooling everyone around them too. And that woman in that story, she had gone to AA. And so I was like, well, let me try it. And I went to my first AA meeting the next day and kept listening to podcasts in the meantime, was just filling my ears with anything to get through the day. And I went to my first AA meeting, and that started my journey. But in addition to AA, I kept adding more and more stuff. So my recovery turned into a buffet of recovery options, between going to meetings. I had an online accountability group on Facebook. I was listening to podcasts. I was back in therapy. I was, working the steps. I was doing all of the things, just trying to see what worked. And if it didn't work, I'll try something else. That worked great for a little while. Awesome. Well, maybe it stopped later. So I'll try this too. I was always kind of moving around and giving and taking and refreshing it and making it my own, so that I could enjoy it, and above all, just continue to not drink.
I love that. I love that open-mindedness.
Yeah, I needed it though. At the time, that's just what I needed. That's not everyone's story, but that was November 14th, 2016. So coming up on 8 years next month. And sometimes it feels like 8 hours, and then sometimes it feels like 800 years.
I know.
But you still do it one day at a time regardless.
Oh, that's awesome to hear. I'm big into open-mindedness. I'm an AA person because it works for me. But I can also be a podcast person. I can be a quit lit person. I love the idea of just being open to something else. And I remember early on myself, I needed to reach out to just find. Your story is about as close to mine as I have heard in a long time, to the point that I talk a lot about. I was not an alcoholic because I knew about wines. I knew what a Chateau Neuf de Pop was. I drank Cote de Rhone. I still have the glasses that on holidays I drink water out of, or something sparkly, like seltzer or something. But I wasn't, because alcoholics don't have Spiegelou and Riedel glasses that are tuned to a certain varietal.
I know. Yeah, I thought the same thing. I was like, but I know like what day to stop drinking Beaujolais Nouveau. Like, I know everything. How could I? It's almost like if you think like you know enough about it, you can outsmart it. Yep. Especially growing up in an alcoholic family, I thought, well, I'm informed about alcoholism. If I know enough about it, I can outthink it. And the most humbling experience is when it finally catches up with you, and you go, oh wait, I'm not immune to this thing.
Yeah. That was mine. I've got a bunch of people in my family who are alcoholics, and I always wanted to be just before the line. Like there's this line. If I cross this line, I'm an alcoholic. So I have to be careful with my drinking so I never cross over to that line.
Right.
Not realizing that that mindset means you're well past the line.
It
And
also probably means the line keeps moving.
well, there's a lot of denial. How did you avoid the denial of I'm in withdrawal? And though, because I had those moments too, and I just said I must have a stomach bug.
Because it was too real and too scary, because my kidneys hurt so bad. It was like, there's a way that I put this back in the day. I'm trying to remember. It was like, it was just too real. It was like, I finally just accepted reality. Like all of the lies and the things, the sales pitch you keep giving to yourself, that cognitive dissonance, that waking up in the morning and saying, I'm not going to drink today. And then by 4:00, you're already 2 drinks in. Like that, in that span of time, that cognitive dissonance where you forget, like I finally stopped forgetting, like all of a sudden it was just, we were here. And it's not like this would, like, I gotta be honest, I always knew I was going to have to quit someday. I didn't listen. I didn't want to like give that any light, but I always knew. So once I arrived, I guess it just wasn't a surprise that that I had indeed arrived and we were here. And I also said, Tricia, if you're going to do this, you're going to do it one time. You're going to do it one time. You're going to do it right. You're going to go all the way. And I needed, in order to make that happen, I needed accountability. I needed public accountability. We can get into the anonymity thing here in a minute, but like I ended up going, I gotta say, I ended up going on recovery elevator when I was 30 days sober, and shared my story with the whole world at 30 days sober. And the reason why I did that was because I knew if I didn't announce it big and tall and loud, then I was going to talk myself into drinking again. So I didn't give myself the option. I set up every insurance policy to make sure I stuck with it. And it was scary, but that accountability keeps me sober. Of many other ways of accountability too, but that was a big one. I'm glad I did it early.
Let's dig into a little bit of the anonymity thing, because you opened the door there. Mm-hmm. What are your as somebody who had been an AA person, what are the thoughts for you on anonymity?
First, I want to say for everyone who's listening that is in 12-step, that I love AA for a lot of reasons, and I believe in it as a program, and I don't think that it is the end-all be-all. So anything negative that I'm going to say about it, I just want the listeners to understand that, Oh,
hold on a second. I have an old timer here who wants to say something. What is that?
I want to fight you.
He's sitting next to the guy that's always telling me, as long as I keep the plug in the jug, you'll be fine.
I'm telling you, get away from me.
I know, right?
Right.
Get off my lawn. I think that I want to acknowledge the fact that you can just take what you want and leave the rest.
Yes.
Nobody walks into a restaurant and wants to eat every single thing on the menu. Does it keep you from going to the restaurant though? No, you find something you like and you order it. That's how recovery works. So about anonymity, I think where anonymity does not serve us is accountability and sharing the message. I think when it comes to recovery, we need to cast as wide of a net as possible, because people are not running towards sobriety. They're running away from it. We got it. It's like we have to reach them. And I think the more we keep that secret, the less people we're serving. Now, within the rooms, I understand anonymity and why we don't want to share, people's stories outside with people that don't need to know that. That makes total sense. But I think that it doesn't need to be one or the other. I think it can be a little bit of both.
I agree.
And that binary thinking is what gets us into trouble, because I don't know about your listeners, but I live in America. And in America, we have so many options. We have too many options.
Yep.
So it's not like you do it this way or this way. You do it this way and this way. We can do it. We can do it all. It doesn't have to be one or the other.
Yeah, I'm of a believer that whatever is going to keep you sober, you do that.
Yes.
This is a tough one. It's gray because I really don't want to piss off the AA people. That's important to me. It's a big part of the audience. If you're going to do a podcast successfully, you kind of have to put yourself out there and go with a little bit of a gray line because you got to get the message out there. And I understand the whole attraction, not promotion.
Mm-hmm.
We also have an audience coming up. It sounds like you and I are probably same age range, Gen X-ish. Mm-hmm. But the people coming in, the Zs, the millennials, the people after that, they only know being out and going through TikTok and putting their videos out and stuff. That's normal. Mm-hmm. You're not going to reach somebody with a pamphlet. It used to really piss me off going to GSR meetings and then saying, we need a new pamphlet for this. And I'd raise my hand and say, we need an app. Can we do this online? And they go, nobody has phones. I'm like, what's your problem, dude? So you do need to reach people where they are.
Yeah.
And Bill, I'm convinced that Bill W. would have had a TikTok page. He would have been doing lip syncs because he did a book because it just was the avenue.
Yeah, if he lived longer, I'm sure he would have evolved, the program in a few different ways, and what a blessing that we have technology. What a surprising bonus gift of the pandemic was that we had to meet online when before it was like, what? Online? No, we would never, and being open-minded to what the world, being open-minded to the conversations that are being had. Like you said, with younger kids, like nothing is off limits. They're sharing all their stuff online. Doesn't mean they should share all of it online, but the fact that it's like socially acceptable, it's normal to do that. Man, that's awesome.
You need something to identify with.
Yeah.
And what I like about your story as well that you're pretty loud with is you don't have to hit the bottom of not having a home anymore, losing your family, losing your job. Your bottom can just be undone.
Yeah.
You don't have to wait until your liver has cirrhosis. You can get it in time.
Right. That's so true. And that was something that we also chatted about before this was, even the word alcoholic, so I met so many people on my show. I had 135 episodes, something like that. And out of all those stories, everybody says the same thing of, well, I didn't think I was an alcoholic though. I wasn't XYZ, trope 1, trope 2, trope 3. And once they realize that you don't have to qualify to have a drinking problem,
right,
then the rubber meets the road. You don't have to get so bad. You don't have to call yourself an alcoholic to get help. You don't have to call yourself an alcoholic to see that alcohol is not serving you. And it's not even about how much you drink. It's how much are you thinking about drinking? If you go and you have 2 glasses of wine every night after, with or after dinner, most people will go, oh, it's just 2 glasses of wine. Well, if you don't have control over that and those 2 glasses of wine have more power over you than you have over them, you're allowed to say, I don't want to do this anymore. And I want to learn how to make that happen. You don't have to get really bad to get there. You don't have to call yourself an alcoholic. We're now seeing that there is a whole spectrum of unhealthy drinking habits. There's this, now we're calling it, gray area drinking. Are you abusing it every day? Maybe not. Are you getting DWIs? Maybe not. But maybe you're abusing it more than you want. Maybe you don't like how you behave and you don't know why you do it. Like there's lots of reasons to just say enough is enough and I choose me now. It's a wide thing to step over to get in the door. But if it comes down to language, then let's start using different language so that people can get help,
100%. I'm a big believer in that.
Yeah. And I think that's where I see some of my frustrations with with AA have been that, yeah, but what if you're not an alcoholic? You're still allowed, and you
Yep.
still, I think, are allowed to participate and not call yourself that,
All you have to have is a desire to stop drinking. Although that
Exactly.
term is there and people could, have to identify as an alcoholic. Even in a closed meeting, the most restrictive AA meeting that's there, it is closed out. Anybody, you can't go unless you're there because you have a desire to stop drinking. And even in that restrictive sense, there's nothing about being an alcoholic.
Right, right. And also, I want to say that I call myself an alcoholic.
As do I.
And I think you and I had the same experience. When I called myself that for the first time in a meeting, I felt free.
Yep.
I felt, okay, well, now I know what it is. Now I know where to begin. I know where we're starting from now. And that's important, whether the word is alcoholic or the word is, I don't know, fire hydrant. As long as you start there, you know where you're beginning and where you want to go, great.
I have a friend who doesn't use the term alcoholic. She uses the term alcohol use disorder. I know that the way she drank was a lot like me, and she had sort of the same reaction. I love the term alcoholic because it is harsh, and I want to be reminded of that harshness. It keeps me in check. But if that term alcoholic is something that you recoil from, and you want to use something like, I think I have alcohol use disorder, then you're good with that. And if you want to go to an AA meeting and say, hey, my name is Matt and I have alcohol use disorder, I would be good with that. And anybody who gives you a hard time, they have a problem. You don't. Even if it's, I just don't want to drink anymore. I don't like how it makes me feel. And you don't want to qualify, but you're doing the things you need to do to stay sober. To me, that's good. I want the barriers lower.
Yeah.
And I want more openness for people to get the tools necessary to be sober.
Yes, absolutely. I think like I said, we want to cast a wider net. And I want that guy who always used to say, and I'm so-and-so and I'm a real alcoholic. Like those types of phrases in a meeting are not helpful. Those are, again, like, let's just welcome everyone and try not to qualify. Let's not try to make our problem the worst and mean that we deserve more to be in there. Everybody deserves to be in there for whatever reason.
I had a problem with that because I heard that terms like that, I'm a real alcoholic. And even though I knew I had a problem, I felt like I didn't belong because I wasn't as bad as those people. And the thing that snapped me out of it was, okay, let's say I'm not as bad. Let's say I don't deserve the chair more than the guy next to me who was bleeding from the ears and his nose and fell into the ER. I know that I enjoy being there and I feel welcome and it feels right to be there. And even if I don't, quote, have a problem, there's nothing that is going to go bad for me because I'm not drinking.
Right.
So if I'm overreacting, I still feel as though this is where I should be, and there's no cost for not drinking. So I kept going.
Right. And just to be in community with other people who have been in your shoes, like that is such a foundational part of recovery and AA. Right. And I think that, 20 years ago when AA was the only place for community, it was easy to say, yeah, this is the one way to do it. Well, if you've got more opportunities for community that have a different label on them, they're called something else. I don't think that devalues that community because we need community, just capital C, period. And I can't even finish that sentence. Community is amazing. The 12-step process is amazing. They're both helpful. I've done the 12 steps. I love them. I want everyone to do the 12 steps. You can 12-step anything, by the way. It's like a really cool system and kind of checklist in my brain. But yeah, but get in there, try it. If it doesn't work, go try something else. But also try everything, you know? Especially try the things you don't want to try. Because half the time, the things I don't want to do are the things that I really need to do. So
I look at something like Recovery Elevator, which they have their own community. And just looking into it, I'm like, oh, this is a kind of a different version of AA. But it's something that if that works for you, you can.
So, I don't mean to interrupt, but that group was my personal experience. So that Facebook group, what it gave me, in addition to the community that the rooms gave me, was that there was somebody there 24/7, because at 2:00 in the morning, my time, is in the middle of the day in Australia. And there's a woman who's up and she knows my story. And if I need to talk to her, she's right there.
Yep.
So that community it saved me. It was amazing. Again, community, capital C, just get it wherever.
There are lots of people who have communities. I've got a friend who runs her own type of community. And I look at something like that as that could be your primary, but it wouldn't stop somebody who is in AA to say, okay, I'm going to get a membership to this community and it is my MBA. As opposed to, AA is my BA, this is my MBA. It's a little something more and it's something different, but it makes me feel better. This really isn't about, at a certain point, what do I need to do to cross my legs a certain way so I don't drink? Sort of like I'm doing the pee-pee dance and I got to prevent myself from peeing because I got 50 miles to the next rest area. It's really about, what do I need to do so I feel okay?
Right. Yeah.
I just want to feel better.
Yeah, I want to do more than survive.
Yep.
Yeah, let's look for opportunities to learn how to thrive. And if I don't know those, then I'm going to go somewhere and ask somebody who's been through this and see what they can help me with. That's like I said, we are not inherently taught healthy coping skills.
Nope.
Today's generation will be, I'm sure, but ours wasn't. So, it's okay to ask. No one inherently knows how to quit drinking.
I just got out of the direct people leader business over the past year. And I led frontline staff for like 15 years. And there's a lot I learned from like the elementary schools and the things that they're doing with kids now that are out of this world. Just my daughter has pretty severe dyslexia, and she has ADHD, and she has accommodations where she can have a computer with voice assist, and she has this little wobbly thing that she sits on that helps her stay focused. And I had those thoughts with my people around what are some of those things that I can bring into the workplace that I learned from elementary school that are just like so progressive. Like, kids can't sit for more than 2 hours hearing a lecture. Like adults can't either. Why do we do that?
Right.
So, and I think it's sort of the same thing with being open with, let's try some new things sober-wise.
Right. And also, let's get a certified mental health professional in addition to that.
Yes.
Again, AA, 12 steps, wonderful. If that's the one thing you do to stay sober, fantastic. Keep doing it. Also, go talk to a licensed mental health professional.
Yep.
People in the rooms are not certified like mental health professionals. Get somebody out like with a different perspective, and listen to them. And if they're not a great fit, go find a different one.
Exactly. I go to a therapist, been going to a therapist for years.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of it. I look through people of what's your experience with recovery. I had, before the therapist I have now, she retired on me. She focused.
I hate it when they do that.
She focused on 12-step recovery. That was her, what's the term I'm looking for? That's her specialty. Right. So that was really helpful at that time for me because I could talk around issues, but she could bring it back to what step is this?
Right. Oh, that's great.
That was so helpful.
Yeah, it's great. I love that.
Give me your thoughts on non-alcoholic drinks, because I have seen on Instagram lots of stuff with you, with the non-alcoholic stuff.
Well, one of the things that I wanted to focus on when I started the Recovery Happy Hour podcast was I wanted to share stories of people who had been sober for at least a year. Sharing the drunk part of our stories serves a very, very important purpose. But I was looking for a podcast about what happened after that. So so I started it. And the focus became more about like the fun, let's look for cool opportunities to give us that feeling that we're still out and partying with our friends, but we don't involve alcohol in it. So, and also I have a culinary background. So finding new, fun tasting drinks, innovative ingredients, all that stuff was just a natural fit for me. And my gosh, the non-alcoholic beverage industry is exploded since
Absolutely.
I stopped drinking. Oh my gosh, there used to be like one Dusty O'Doul's, and
Or Sharps.
yeah, yeah, that was like, or Buckler, that was like expired and warm in a restaurant. Maybe they could go find it, but now it's like people have mocktail menus. There are,
There are whole bars
yeah,
that are just sober bars.
yes, there are whole sober bars, Total Wine and Spirits. They've got like, two sides of a whole aisle now. Beyond the Bar is a non-alcoholic bottle shop located in Richardson, Texas, right by me. It's tremendous. So I was looking for ways to do the things I used to do without drinking, and not in an unhealthy way, but just like still go out and be social and fit in and make it not so weird that I was out hanging out with people and I wasn't drinking, and maybe they are. And so yeah, I've always been like just chasing like the next fun thing. Like, I'm just excited about food and, food and beverage in general. So I've really celebrated that and have tried all types of, NA beers. I remember some people kind of shaking their fingers at me in the beginning, like, you really shouldn't drink non-alcoholic beer. And I just, this is where in recovery you kind of have to start discerning and figuring out who you're trusting and listening to, and what you want to leave, So yeah, it's been really fun to play around with this exploding industry as it becomes more normal to not drink. Now so many people are choosing sobriety as a health choice, as a lifestyle choice,
Yes.
rather than addiction and recovery. And that's wonderful. I've been dying to get to this place, because it used to be you'd say you don't drink and people would go, well, why? What's wrong? What's your problem? Did you have a problem? How bad was your problem? They'd go right into it. But now it's just like, you don't drink? Oh, like that's super normal. And that is really cool. I'm sorry, I was part of the group that worked really hard to get us to this place.
That's awesome. Non-alcoholic drinks are not part of my life just because, I don't know, I don't want the taste of that stuff if it doesn't have, it's just sort of like, I can get by with a soda. It's just not my thing.
Yeah.
But I love the fact that there are those options, and there are people that this is a thing that is going to be helpful.
Yes.
Or, kids now drink less than we did. And just to have a place that it's a cool place to go. It's a sober bar with real tasting beverages that really taste like alcohol, but you're not going to get a buzz from this stuff.
Right.
Having that as an option that's not O'Doul's, that is something that is high quality, is good. And if you look through, it's a lot of the big booze manufacturers have gotten on board with it.
Yeah,
they know where there's money to be made.
They're starting to buy up those little non-alcoholic spirit companies.
Yeah.
It's massive right now. And I gotta say, non-alcoholic beer never really triggered me, but non-alcoholic wine, that was something I had never been able to get into because it was too just mess with my brain.
I would be
too much.
terrified with that one.
Yeah, that was too hard for me. But then, years later, like I had an espresso martini, a non-alcoholic espresso martini. And I was so afraid at first because that was one of my favorite things I used to drink. And I tried it and it wasn't triggering. Didn't make me feel weird, but it took a while to get to that place. Your recovery evolves, your tastes evolve, your tolerance for different things. Tolerance is not the word I should use. Your,
I get what you're saying.
Your recovery muscles evolve. And those things change. And again, like I remember just thinking, like having to really give myself a pep talk when I was enjoying a non-alcoholic beer years ago, going, Tricia, you're fine right now. You're like, it's okay to be okay about this. I had to learn how to trust myself. That's hard to do,
I think it's do what works for you.
Yes.
And I think it's more of, I hate to say the young people, I don't think I'm that old, but I'm old enough that the people in their 20s and 30s this is more of a norm, and it is something that is getting them over the hump. So if that works for you and you need that and it makes you feel comfortable socially, and that's what you do.
Yeah. And, when I first got sober in 2016, and then into 2017, the topic of trauma really started coming up into just general mental health conversations a lot more.
This is kind of exactly where I want to go with you. Shame and trauma, especially with women.
Yeah, and I remember that having a realization that, oh, I wasn't drinking just to drink. I was drinking over things. I was drinking instead of dealing with trauma that I had not identified. There's still lots of things festering that needed to be discussed. But that wasn't something I knew on my own. And that wasn't something I knew like from a friend. Like that was like, okay, I need to talk to a certified mental health professional about this. I need to be reading some books that she's suggested. Trauma is a very important part of recovery, that it may not be part of everyone's story, but there should be a little bit of self-inventory there at least.
I don't know. I think there's a lot of people who have issues with alcohol where trauma comes into play. I didn't realize I had PTSD until this year. Talking to my therapist, she finally dug down and said, has anybody talked about you about PTSD? And I'm like, no. Yeah. Like I haven't been like hurt or physically or whatever. She goes,
I haven't been to war. I don't qualify.
Right. And she's like, you talked about this. That is trauma you went through. And I see where that has its roots to where you're talking now. You're dealing with that trauma from the past. And I didn't even realize it.
Yeah, it's a big one. PTSD, when a doctor says that, we all go, yeah, I haven't been through enough, though. What do you mean PTSD? I haven't been to war. Like, no, like it's not about what you've been through. It's how your brain has processed it. Trauma, I think I don't know if it's more part of women's story than men. Probably not. I think maybe women are just more attuned to it. Someone could fight me on that. That's fine. But like when I think about going through the steps, which I've done, and I think they're so valuable. Step 4 can be pretty tricky sometimes if somebody is not trauma informed, and there is no trauma informed like part of AA. Like that's the book hasn't been updated, right? Like that's like there are things that I don't want to, how do I say this without it not sounding like dramatic? It's touchy because sometimes when trauma is not handled properly, you can do more harm than good.
Absolutely.
It is, a great sponsor, especially with a woman and going through that sexual inventory in step 4, a great sponsor will thrive here, but someone who doesn't have that knowledge about trauma could do some damage there. That's the only one where I'm just like, I wish there were a little more guardrails on it. It doesn't mean that everyone is traumatized and is traumatized by step 4. Not at all. I don't want anyone to take this out of context. But trauma plays a part. It's not discussed in the book. There's a gap there. And I just think it's worth keeping in the conversation.
Yeah. I'm just thinking that one through with if you're not dealing with somebody who is taking the trauma seriously or gives you the wrong advice, that really could be a problem. And I think about it, especially with women and talking about it with the right person, that women have different issues and there are things that could take a left turn that would be bad that men never have to deal with.
Let's look at some statistics. 1 out of 4 women has been sexually assaulted, right? The numbers are probably closer to 1 in 3, but 1 out of 4, right? That's what the statistics say. So let's say, let's say every woman does the 12 steps. So we're talking about 1 out of 4 women who's got trauma around sex or their body. And they've probably got a lot of shame around that too. They're probably blaming themselves for a lot of it. And unless worked through in a specific way where you have a certified mental health professional to guide you towards your goal, again, can be a scary and dangerous place if not handled properly.
Yeah, I'm just thinking of a topic just for another podcast sometime around what are the things that would be worth updating and why. And some of those are around, it's not about changing the steps. It's about how do you handle trauma? How do you handle certain types of codependency? How do you update the thoughts around in the 1930s, you don't leave a spouse necessarily because there's violence in the household, but you wouldn't think about it now. What are the things that you should do? What are the things you should do to keep yourself healthy in these things, and what you could do that could make it worse?
Right. And there's no question that that the program was written for men. That's just, it's written for men. Doesn't mean it's not meant for women, but it was written in a way that was for men. And
no, it was very specific that only alcoholics are men.
Yes, and that's
women
why,
who have
that's why there's a chapter called for the wives. And if they
Yes.
wanted to update it for the spouses or for the partners, that would be lovely. But knowing those things now, again, we have just like anything, go into it with an open mind, but also trust your gut.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. This has been such an awesome talk.
Oh,
I have really enjoyed this, and I hope you listening to this, that you have enjoyed this a lot. Tricia, thank you so much for doing this.
you're welcome. Could I offer the audience a few resources?
Absolutely.
Great. Well, I wanted to say, first of all, because I know you've got 12-step people in here, that I love you all, and I think the program is tremendous. For people that wanted to add more to that program in addition to it, again, there are some fantastic podcasts out there. Recovery Happy Hour was mine. That's one of them. That is a sort of more of an all-around approach. I've got stories of people who have done 12-step, who've done Celebrate Recovery, who have, IOP, have done all of it. And so there's lots of different stories on there, and they have great resources. But yeah, man, there's a tab on my website. I'm recoveryhappyhour.com that just says get help. There's great resources on there as far as like search engines for finding a therapist, some great books, podcasts, coaching, do your homework,
Yes.
do your
Definitely.
homework. Ask what certifications they have, but just know that there's a lot out there that you can add in addition to what you're already doing. It doesn't always have to be this or that. Do it all.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm going to put that in the show notes so you can click on it, look at the show notes, and you're going to see some of that stuff so you don't have to just write it down. You're probably driving while you're listening to this. Thank you so much for doing this. This is a breath of fresh air today.
You're so welcome. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. We'll see everybody next week. Bye, everybody. You made it this far into the podcast. That tells me you're a pretty big fan. If you like what we do and you find value in the podcast, consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod. Your donation keeps us on the air to help out the new guy and helps us defray some of our costs. If you find value in our podcast, please consider a donation at buymeacoffee.com/soberfriendspod.